Corruption in South Africa. It's not just a headline, it's a way of life for those in power. And sitting with us today is the man who stood on the front lines of it all. He's been harassed, smeared, arrested, dragged through courtrooms, and threatened with his life. And yet he never gave up. Some call him South Africa's last honest cop. General Johan Booysen, former head of the Hawks in KwaZulu-Natal, wrote a story in the book Blood on Their Hands. It's a book about dirty wars, political interference, and a justice system on the brink of collapse. Today we're going to hear his truth from the Cato Manor saga to his battle with powerful politicians to his warning of a nuclear explosion inside our criminal justice system. And we'll ask, has South Africa already reached a tipping point? And what hope is left for ordinary citizens? General, welcome. Can you give us some background about yourself, where you grew up, and why you joined the police force?
I grew up as a youngster in the Vaal Triangle, a place called Vanderbijl Park. When I was 11, we moved to KwaZulu-Natal, it was called Natal at the time, and we lived on the south coast of in the Mabsantoti, where I went to Kiswag School and later went to Port Natal High School. And ultimately landed up in the police.
Right. Can I call you on?
Sure.
Okay, awesome. Any stories that would say that you would say are highlights or lowlights in your career? Because it's vast. I mean, it's so many stories, it's amazing. But what were some of the highlights and lowlights in your career?
Well, obviously, joining the police and passing out as a fully fledged constable with a blue uniform, that was a highlight in itself. And later on, becoming an officer, which at the time was quite an achievement. Nowadays, it's much easier to become a commissioned officer. And then later on, with a new dispensation, I managed to remain in the police service. It was called the police force, and it became the police service in 1995. And subsequent to 1995, with the democracy, I was promoted on 3 occasions. So those were my highlights in my career in the police.
Okay. Billy the Kid, did you want to tell some of those stories?
Well, now that's more on operational level, though. Billy the Kid was a guy by the name of Booysen. I was still stationed at the Durban Murder Robbery Unit at the time, and we got a radio message that a policeman had been shot in the Mbombulu area. It's a rural area in KwaZulu-Natal. So I rushed off with a colleague of mine. I think his surname was Miller. And when we arrived there, the chopper was already in the air, and they were looking for the assailant. I had discussions with the K9 detectives, and we decided to split up. Peter Knop went down the ravine. I went to the other side with Miller and a few other vehicles following. And then when we got to the other side of the ravine, I had automatic fire. And then I thought it was Peter Knop and them shooting. And then I rushed back to where we had left them. And on my arrival there, I just heard over the radio, the warrant is down, meaning Peter Knop had been shot. It later emerged that he was ambushed by Booysen. Him and his police dog were shot and killed. And from there, a manhunt emanated. It took us exactly a year to locate him, but in the meantime, he had ambushed other policemen as well, killed them cold-bloodedly. And exactly a year later, we had information where he was hiding. We approached, well, I got there a bit late. By the time I'd gotten there, the shootout had already ensued, and a hand grenade had been thrown at my detectives. One guy seriously injured, he lost his one eye. One of the other guys had serious hand wounds. But when I arrived, the shooting was still carrying on. And then eventually we decided, we had a police casper there, myself, one of the warrant officers, Andy Butker, and a guy from the reaction unit, the tactical unit, Lieutenant Pine Pinar. He was driving the Casper. And eventually I just said to him, look, take the Casper and let's ram the house. And that's what he did. Booysen and a couple of his colleagues were shot and killed. And that was the end of his reign of terror.
What I found interesting, I mean, I'm terrible with statistics, but it's mentioned in the book something like close to there's been more cash transit heists than there are days in the year. What's that statistic? It's like within a year there were more cash transit heists than there were days in the year.
Well, during the period just before 2006, one could say there was almost a cash and transit heist just about every day. And it's during that period between 2006 and 2009, after the establishment of the Durban Organised Crime Unit, the Violent Crime Section, being Cato Manor. They were called Cato Manor because their offices were located in Cato Manor. And one of the functions were addressing the ATM bombings and cash and transit heist. And we managed to bring it down to, I cannot recall the figures, but we basically had almost 100% solving rate.
Wow.
And cash and transit heist and ATM bombings in that period, 2006 to 2009, was almost, it was almost unheard of. So much so at our national meetings, it was actually a standing joke from my colleagues in other provinces that they were robbing them and that they weren't robbing KZN.
Violence in the 80s and 90s. History books, what we learn now, it seems to blame the National Party and the IFP. But did you think the ANC amplified it?
Look, when those political machinations were ongoing, I was not into the politics just yet. I was still a young policeman at the time. But it is so between the IFP, initially between the IFP and the ANC, but it later emerged that elements from within the nationalist government were supporting the IFP. And large arms caches were recovered in the north of KwaZulu-Natal. So I think it was a combination of the IFP being supported by elements within the National Party, probably rogue elements, to probably neutralize the emergence of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal. And that led to a lot of political violence in the province.
Oh, yeah, interesting. So you definitely think there was a...
Well, I don't think so. I think there's evidence to that effect that came out in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I think there was a guy by the name of Powell that was found to have worked within the IFP, and arms caches or arms were supplied to him via elements from within the police at the time.
Okay, the ANC.
No, he was in the IFP side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us about Edward Zuma, your first encounter with him, what led to it, and what unfolded from it.
Well, at the time, I just become the head of the Hawks in KwaZulu-Natal, and one of the first major investigations that we embarked upon was a multi-million rand corruption investigation involving senior police officers and prominent businessmen in KwaZulu-Natal. Soon after the investigation, we established that he had managed to obtain contracts from SAPS in the space of 8 months of totaling 60 million rand. 60 million rand in 2010, one could almost double that figure today.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was informed by our finance department they had already paid at 45 million rand of the 60 million rand, and I froze the remainder of the money. And that's when I got a visit from Edward Zuma, the erstwhile president's son, wanted to see me in my office. He came to my office and requested me to release the 15 million rand. And I asked him why I should do that. And he said to me that, well, he was a silent partner of the businessman and that he had invested in his business. Obviously, I declined the request. And that was him visiting my office and tried to me to release the money, and me not releasing the money at the time had its consequences for myself later on.
So the 50 million. Okay, I'm just curious. How does he get a number from a person like you? How do you think? How did you just get that number to contact you?
I don't know. Obviously, the policemen and policewomen involved in the corruption were within the same building that I worked in. So it's obvious that they must have given them the number to get hold of me.
Interesting. So he just messaged you, I want a meeting with you, and
He phoned my secretary and he wanted a meeting with me, and she told me, and I said to her, well, it's fine. But then he indicated he would like to meet me in a restaurant or somewhere else. And I said to her, no. If he wants to meet me, he should come to my office so it can be diarized into her diary, and it'll be an official meeting so that there's record of the meeting itself.
fascinating. And then the media turned its gaze on you. I mean, all of a sudden, all these stories started spreading. What stories suddenly escalated and put you at the center of national television and attention?
What happened is with this investigation, there were attempts to stop the investigation from senior management within SAPS. They failed to do that. We proceeded with the investigation. The protagonists then took us to court to try and overturn the investigation. They failed. And then they tried to bribe me with 2 million rand. They once again failed because after they placed some of the money in my car, we had them arrested. And then I was approached, and obviously this is still subject of a court case, so I would not like to go into the detail of that because the evidence still has to be laid in court. But nevertheless, I was approached and I was requested to compromise the investigation, and there was a quid pro quo, and the quid pro quo would be that they would pay me. I did not respond immediately. I first obtained permission from the Director of Public Prosecutions in terms of applicable legislation to proceed with the meetings with him. So part of the discussions I had with this police officer who approached me, he showed me photographs, but all those photographs were of normal crime scenes. And I think it was perhaps a way of trying to intimidate me. And he said to me that he could get more of the photos. And I said, well, you're welcome. But subsequent to me having him arrested on the 11th of December 2011, the Sunday Times came out with the front page story, Shoot to Kill, where they alleged that I was the leader of a hit squad that were doing extrajudicial killings. And then all hell broke loose. I was driving to work in the morning in my head when my name was on the billboards, and just about it carried on for weeks, or months, the focus by the media on the so-called death squad at the time.
And do you want to walk us through that? The Cato Manor saga, you were arrested on racketeering and murder charges in 2012.
Yeah, so obviously I became aware after the newspaper article that when it was announced that those allegations were being investigated, I became aware soon afterwards that the focus was on myself. They investigated every aspect of my life, my private life, my finances, my vehicle claims, all the approvals that financial improvements I've made in the past. And I realized then that there's something amiss. And then I was phoned by a lady from a television station, and she said to me, I think that was in March that year, she said to me, General, they're going to charge you for racketeering. And I said to her, it must be joking. I've been trained to investigate racketeering by the Americans. I know what racketeering is. And she said to me, no, they're looking at it. I just ignored it. And then obviously when they couldn't find anything against me, they decided to take the incidents where the Cato Manor detectives had been involved in shootings and then allege that those were actually murder, extrajudicial killings. And in terms of the Prevention of Organized Crime Act, if you want to charge a person for racketeering, you have to show two predicate offenses. But then you can you have to find a manager for the enterprise. So they conveniently decided that either the hierarchy in KwaZulu-Natal, I was going to be the manager. So they charged me for being the manager of a criminal enterprise. And I was also charged with one charge of murder in Howick. Now, when this shooting took place, I happened to be sitting in my office minding my own business. And when I heard about the shooting, I summoned the police helicopter. I flew to the scene. I didn't even go on the scene proper. I noticed what had been happening and got in the chopper and flew back. And then the allegation later was that I actually commanded the whole operation from the chopper in the air, and that I landed there to plant an AK-47. Now, the irony of the matter is, at the time when I arrived there, all the media had already arrived. And there's in the book that I co-did with Jessica Pitchford, that's why they decided to make that the cover of the book. So the cover of the book shows me getting out of the helicopter. And that's actually a photograph from the Witness newspaper, which they took when I arrived on the scene. And I'm still betting to see where, if I look at the photograph, where I could have been hiding the AK-47, which I supposedly planted on the scene.
And at the time, how many years have you been in the service when they arrested you?
I think probably about 34, 35 years.
35 years. Wow. So many believe this was political sabotage to stop corruption probes. Do you think that was the case?
I don't think so. I know it was. That was my evidence at the Zondo Commission of Inquiry. It became clear afterwards that it was not only myself, with the likes of Glenys Breitenbach, Johan van Lochenberg, Ivan Pillay, even Pravin Gordon, Shadrick Sabia, the then head of the Hawks, Anwar Dramat. If you look at all those people at the time, were somehow involved with sensitive investigations relating to corruption, implicating politicians. So it could have been no coincidence that all those people that were involved with those investigations suddenly became targets. And the further indication that it was all a concerted effort was that invariably the same prosecutors, amongst them the one that's now been suspended, Advocate Chauke from Gauteng, who the president had announced in terms of reference for his disciplinary hearing or his to establish his fitness to remain in office. And some of the other prosecutors as well, Advocate Jiba. She happened to be the head of the National Prosecuting Authority at the time. I testified at her fitness hearing, the Magoro Commission of Inquiry, and she was ultimately dismissed for that by the president.
And it seemed to me that they tried to humiliate you by the way they arrested you. They really tried to drag you down and put you on the spot, but it turned out in your favor. The people gathered sums, money for you. There was a trust fund established. It turned out in your favor.
I think it was an attempt to humiliate me, but I think it was also a show of force to the powers that be, at whose behest they were doing it. That they were actually they actually arrested General Booysen. And why I say that, the day that I was arrested, when they arrived at the police air wing, the guys actually drove around the back, because when I arrived there, it looked like the Oscars with all the TV cameras. And they don't normally have access to the air wing. But that particular day, they were all given access to the air wing. And the police vehicle drove around the back, and we went into the building. And then one of the policemen came to me and said to me, they'd just been reprimanded because they drove around the back, and they should have stopped. They're supposed to stop in front of the cameras. And I took it up with Glenn Angus from IPID at the time. and with General Mabula, they co-managed the investigation, and they blamed each other for the instruction. But when we left, they came back to me and they said, no, we will now go out of the front door in front of the TV cameras. And I was, Glenn Angus still said to me, would I like to put my jacket over my head? And I said to him, no, I've never had to hide my face. I'm not about to do it now. And I turned around, I said to the guys behind me, that's what I intend doing. And they're welcome to cover their faces, but they all followed suit, and none of us covered our faces. And we walked past the cameras and got into the police vehicle. We were taken to the police cells and detained.
And subsequently, how did the situation unravel, and how long did it take, and what was the process like in court to exonerate yourself?
It was a very ardent and strenuous process. Obviously, in the beginning, I thought people had made false statements against me. But as part of the court proceedings, the state has to discover all the evidence they intend using against you before the trial starts. And when they did the discovery, I went through the dockets and I saw that I figured nowhere. It just didn't make sense that I'd been arrested and prosecuted. So I took the decision by Advocate Juba to prosecute me for racketeering on review in a high court. And the Judge Corbin, ultimately ruled that there was no evidence against me, and that my prosecution was unconstitutional and unlawful. And subsequent to that, the charges were withdrawn.
Probably the stupidest thing is that taxpayers have to fund this stupid exercise.
Well, that's an unfortunate reality. And I litigated because you must also remember, in spite of the fact that the court had ruled that there was no evidence against me, and after Advocate Juba had been replaced by Sean Abrams, he decided to prosecute me again on the very same evidence. And I took that matter on review again. But in the meantime, his appointment had been declared unconstitutional or irrational by the Constitutional Court, and he was relieved of his duties. And the present National Director of Public Prosecutions, Advocate Shamela Batoy, obviously then had to decide, is she going to proceed opposing my application to review the matter? And then she wisely decided to appoint 4 senior advocates from within her own department to review the case against myself and Cato Manor. They brought out a damning report. It's referred to as the Lecoq report, in which it is succinctly explained and described how these prosecutors connived to get myself and the Cato Manor detectives prosecuted.
Generaal, hoe is jy nog lewendig? How are you still alive in one of the most dangerous provinces in South Africa? So many killings, political killings. It seems to me it's a miracle you're still alive to witness all of this and to tell about it.
Well, maybe I'm lucky. No, look, I've been in situations. During one operation, I was stabbed with an assegai. I'd been involved in a couple of shootings. So, yeah, I'm very fortunate to have come out of it unscathed. And I'm a religious man, so yes, I think there is someone looking after me, and perhaps a bit of luck added to the mix.
Just don't go near a high-story building, especially in Paris.
Yeah, that's a different story.
Have you received death threats? I assume you have, probably.
So yes, during the mid-90s, we were involved with investigations against prominent taxi bosses, and our crime intelligence unit picked up information that there were plans to get rid of myself and a colleague of mine. Happened to be a thorn in their flesh, Willie Fear. We had permanent guards around us for several weeks. But the situation became untenable. To have people, it's almost an intrusion on your privacy. So between Wilfried and myself, we decided that we'll take care of ourselves, which we did. And then much later, with this particular investigation against the businessman, crime intelligence once again picked up that there were discussions to have myself neutralized. But we did take the appropriate course of action.
Okay, fast forward to the Zondo Commission. What is your honest assessment? Do you think it changed everything?
Well, I think that the judge said very recently that he expressed his dismay that not much had come of the commission itself. I've got my own views why nothing came of it. I just don't think the police, within the police or the Hawks or the prosecuting authority, they have the wherewithal to address the enormous load of work that came in over the period of the commission. Although I maintain, and I've said so on many occasions, and I concluded my evidence at the Zondo Commission, I think that's where they should have started, and it might have alleviated the present problems that they are experiencing. They should have gotten rid of all the remnants of the Juba faction within the prosecuting authority. Those prosecutors that target the people that were doing corruption investigations. Fortunately, they managed to get rid of a person like Burning and Clemetso, who was appointed as head of the Hawks. Ria Piega, she managed to stay around until a contract ran out. But even though it was found that she was not fit to remain in office after the Marikana saga.
Do you want to talk about Nathi Mthethwa now being...
Look, it's a difficult thing to talk about because I don't want to sound insensitive. I mean, he lost his life. It seems by his own hand. But yes, I testified at the Zondo Commission. For those who want to go and check my affidavit, paragraph 77 of my 500-page affidavit, in which I referred to him specifically, how he had interfered with the investigation, actually demanded our arrest at the time, even though the investigation at the time had hardly commenced. I actually have the handwritten notes of the prosecutor on the day that they had met. And ironically, the person who attended the meeting with him was the present Provincial Commissioner of KwaZulu-Natal, General Mkonazi. It happened on the 8th of March 2012, where they met and instructions were given by the minister that we should be arrested. I also implicated him in the slush fund investigations, the looting of the slush fund. I succinctly described that in my affidavit. Yeah, and I think that's as far as I'm prepared to talk about him, given the circumstances that he's passed away recently.
It's a long arm that you have if you can reach all the way to Paris. It was an assassination. Also send a WhatsApp. I think you sent a WhatsApp to his wife. It's impressive that they can pull that off.
Yeah, no, look, I think the French police are, the dealings that I've had with them, they are quite thorough. So, and I think with all the CCTV footage and forensics, in my view, I don't think he was assassinated. I think he committed suicide.
Advocate Sharkey's suspension, you called it long overdue. Why now? And what does it tell us about the NPA's role now?
Yes, so I know that the present NDPP advocate Shamala Batoy had actually recommended his suspension more than 2 years ago. With that question, I'll raise the same question. Chaka been suspended about 2 months or 3 months ago, which was long overdue. Why did it take so long? And at the same time, I will also ask the question, given the damning evidence against Nathi Mthethwa, the Zondo Commission, and some other controversies which he had been involved in during his tenure as the Minister of Police and of Arts and Culture, how could they ever have considered to appoint him as an ambassador in France?
It's just after joppie.
Hmm.
How deep do you think the rot goes inside a justice system?
I think the entire justice system, police, the judiciary, and correctional services are severely compromised. In my experience with the police, I'm in the private sector now. I work for the Fidelity Security Group. In my daily engagement with law enforcement, and I specifically refer to SAPS and the Hawks. Besides the fact that they have lost the ability and the skills to address crime, organized crime particularly, there's so much corruption. My brother is a private detective, and he said to me the other day, "Johan, you know who my biggest competition is?" I said, "No." He said, "Policemen." So nowadays, it's almost impossible to get something done unless you buy a cold drink or
Yeah.
So within the justice system, I'm still satisfied that our higher courts are still functioning well, but we've had experiences at lower court levels with prosecutors and even magistrates that have been compromised. If you look at Mr. Pieter Groenewald and what he's been exposing, what's happening in the correctional services, I mean, that answers the question. I think the entire justice system has been compromised.
Do you want to comment on Julius Malema now being found guilty on, I think, 5 charges? One disarming, discharging a weapon.
Well, I think there's been a protracted court case, and he's been found guilty. His co-accused Adrian Snyman was found not guilty. Obviously, they still need to be sentenced, and I expect that, and I heard on the news today that he was going to appeal. So I think it would be imprudent of myself to make any comments while the matter is, in fact, still sub judice. The sentencing still has to be passed, and obviously he's going to appeal.
Fair enough. It's not like a bombshell that Mkwanazi has testified about drug cartels infiltrating law enforcement and politicians also interfering. It seems to me a bit strange because I think Jacques Poe wrote about this years ago, and you also released your book. It somehow caught people by surprise. Do you see parallels with your own experience?
Look, I don't think we should be under any illusion. There is corruption within SAPS. There is corruption within the Justice Department and within correctional services. There are senior police officers involved. The recent allegations pertaining to the present minister, Mr. Mkhune, I would not like to, and I think it would be imprudent on myself to express my views on that, given the fact that there is the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry that's ongoing. I think one can safely say that, and it's a very tragic situation, is that the entire justice system, from the bottom to the top, is severely compromised. Having said that, one should not lose sight of the fact that there are still, and I encounter them on occasions as well, in all those departments, prosecutors, detectives from the Hawks, uniformed policemen that still want to do the job, that are still there, not do the job, it's their calling.
Mhm.
I always refer to when I joined the police, to me it was a calling, it wasn't a job. And there are still a number of them left within those institutions. Unfortunately, they are far and in between, and they are being marginalized. And the moment they start to do their work, they get ostracized.
What is the nuclear explosion that you are warning about that's waiting to happen within SAPS and NPA if we don't address many of these issues?
I think I was trying to draw an analogy. I'm not a scientist, but I know in a nuclear explosion, you get a situation of where there's a critical mass, where there's a point of no return. And I'm afraid, and I said recently, if you compare the police to a patient, the patient is on life support. And unless something drastic is being done, they might as well call in the family because the patient is on its way to the mortuary. So with my analogy with a nuclear implosion or explosion was just that I think we rapidly approaching the critical mass time where it's going to be impossible to turn the ship around.
Are we there? Have we reached that tipping point?
I don't think we're there yet, but unless something drastic is being done now at political level, there must be the political will to affect these changes. It's no use having one commission after the other and nothing comes of it. And I think the president has our fate in his hands. The president and the politicians, they have the country's fate in their hands, and I hope they realize the seriousness and the enormity of the responsibility that they have towards the citizens of South Africa.
I get a feeling they don't. When you look globally, do you see any parallels with the instability here?
Well, you only have to look what's going on in Europe now, what's happening in the US. So I think if you look globally, I think the world is in turmoil. You only need to watch CNN or MSNBC or Fox to see what's going on abroad. You have conflict in the Middle East. So I think we're living in difficult times.
Are people being radicalized, do you think? Is this just foreshadowing what is really coming to the fore? I mean, we're seeing now Charlie Kirk's murder, increasingly people becoming polarized, radicalized. Is this happening, and can this have consequences?
Well, I have my personal views on that, and social scientists might not agree with me, but I think what's happening now is a manifestation of what's been happening over the last 2 generations, especially in the US. I think it's a Marxist cultural revolution taking place, and it didn't start in the past decade. It started 2 generations ago with the establishment of the Frankfurt School at the Columbia University in America. It was a bunch of Marxist professors that during the Second World War fled to America, and they were allowed to start lecturing at the Columbia University, which incidentally produces a number of teachers in the US, and they have indoctrinated a whole generation, because all the alumni of those universities eventually land up in Hollywood and Silicon Valley, big tech, big pharma. And so all your CEOs have, in my view, become, if you look at this whole DEI,
which is essentially affirmative action.
Just the different guys. This whole woke culture. So yes, my answer to that is I think people have been radicalized, and it's spreading throughout the world.
Wow, that's interesting. That's the first time I hear about this Columbia story.
Go and read about the Frankfurt School.
When did it happen? What year? Do you know about?
Yeah, it was in the, I think, late 30s, early 40s.
Oh, wow.
So they were lecturers from Frankfurt in Germany. Strangely, if you would ask the average person what nationality Marx was, they would tell you he was a Russian, but he was also German.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Media platforms, I think they have a huge role to play in all this divisiveness. Do you think that's the case?
Well, if you talk about social media, absolutely. If I see the intolerance, I wrote something on Facebook recently with the recent march in Cape Town, where a person would just have the temerity to not agree with them, and the moment you do that, you're either a racist or you're white supremacist, or you're far right, or your apartheid skirt hangs out. I mean, it's people have become extremely intolerant, and you can see that on the social media.
Are you talking about Israel and Palestine?
well, whatever subject you want to talk about, whether it's Charlie Kirk or Israel Palestine, it's almost like there's only two different views, two extreme views.
Yeah. Myself and a cameraman, we tried to cover that and we were chased away. We couldn't even interview people. That's another issue. Okay. After everything you've gone through, why do you persist? Why do you do this? I mean, why are you here? What gives you the courage? What do you see? Why do you do this?
Now, I would say to people, you know, the school my generation came through, it was a difficult school. I mean, I come from a poor background. My father at standard 6, my mother at standard 7. My father was an artisan. He's a boilermaker at Escort. Although we'd come from humble backgrounds, but we had a good childhood, and there was always a sense of discipline in our lives, and I think that prepared my generation prepared us for these type of hardships. I don't think the present generation or the upcoming generations, having gone through a different way of how they were brought up, I don't think they can deal with these type of challenges.
I definitely agree with you.
Should they have to face that now? That now, I used to have a thing under my letterheads: for evil to triumph, good men must do nothing, said by an Irish politician. And that's an easy thing to say, but when fate came knocking at my door, my kids were asking me, "Dad, what the heck is going on there?" I said to them, "Well, it's one thing to preach something and a different thing to practice it." And I think I'm trying to stand by my principles. I'm supported by my family, by my wife and my friends, and even the community. Strangers over the color line would walk up to me in a restaurant and say to me, "We see what you're doing. Thank you for what you're doing. Continue what you're doing." And I think that's the type of thing that encourages myself, and also that keeps me afloat.
Is there any specific story that comes to mind? Just saying, wow, that really surprised me, or that was emotional. One person that really, whatever you said, to encourage you. Is there even one story?
I was involved in a motor vehicle accident. Having been on duty, I had to go back and have the young doctor fill in the forms. And there's a black nurse and the young white lady doctor, she was filling in the forms. And this black nurse looked at me like this, and she said to me, "Aren't you that Booysen, the one that's been on TV?" And I said, "Yes." And she started jumping up and down, and almost like she'd seen a celebrity or something like that, much to my amusement. But this young doctor, she didn't take particular notice. And she said to this doctor, "Don't you know this man?" And she looked up at me and she says, "So, what series do you play in?"
Friends.
So I said to her, "I think while I was on TV, you were probably still studying." It's that type of, and she was so happy to see me. And I don't know, from a bar of soap. I was sitting in a restaurant once, and a young black guy walked up to me. I know him from a bar of soap, and he also said to me, "Thank you so much for what you're doing for the country." It's those type of things that really, I won't say it makes you emotional, but you feel like people are noticing what you're doing.
That's awesome. What would you say to South Africans who just feel powerless? That they can't do anything about corruption? It's just this massive mountain that they can't surpass or overcome. What would you say to South Africans?
If you say you're powerless, then you are powerless. The power is in your hands. It's up to you to make a difference. Now, I get so sick and tired of people around the Braaivleis fire complaining about politics, complaining about this, It's of no use. Well, if you want to complain, go and do something about it. Write to your local newspaper, support your local charities, the NGOs. If it wasn't for a number of organizations like Freedom Under the Law and the Helen Suzman Foundation, taking issue with a lot of these matters that had occurred in the recent past. Support those people, even if you support them financially, but you've got to throw in your weight. You cannot just sit on the sideline and complain. The power is in your hands.
To bring it back to your book, Blood on Their Hands, if listeners and viewers picked it up, what truth do you want him to take away?
Now, there always, and we were saying last night, there's your truth and my truth, but there's always in between, there's the objective truth. When we now face the wrath of the media right in the beginning, I was going to have an interview with carte blanche, and they'd already set up the cameras in my home, and then I got a message they got a message from the then National Commissioner, Ria Piega, that then I'm not allowed to talk to them. So we had to cancel the interview. And to me, it was just strange. I mean, if you are right, you wouldn't mind the other person talking. And then I said to the lady that was the producer, Nikki, I said to her, I undertook that one day, when I'm allowed to talk, that I would do my first interview with her, and we started discussing it. And I still said to her, now I'm thinking about writing about this. And she got me introduced to Jessica Pitchford, the journalist, who wrote the book. I narrated the stories and she wrote the book. And the day when we got together, I said to her, I don't want anything from the book in terms of remuneration. I just want the truth to get out. And that was my main focus on getting the book out there, to tell my truth. And I think time has vindicated me and the detectives that worked with me. So far, if you look at the number of advocates from within the National Prosecuting Authority, if you exclude the 4 that were part of the de Kock report, there's at least 5 others that have come to the same conclusion. The outside advocate that had been appointed by the state at the time, he had come to the same conclusion. The Magoro Commission of Inquiry, the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, the Gorvin judgment. And I was put through a quite arduous disciplinary hearing at the time, lasting 6 months. And after 6 months and 1.7 million rand, which the police had spent on counsel to deal with the matter, Advocate Nasir Kasim, who was the chairperson, his finding was, I think, about 30 pages long. And I can basically take his findings and put it in my CV today. So I think in the truth prevailed.
I think also it's mentioned in the book Sunday Times. They basically told you, listen, we screwed up. You can write an article or an op-ed or whatever to vindicate yourself.
Yeah. So I think it was Matthew Sikoko. He happened to be the editor at the time. The previous editor was Ray Hartley. It was under Ray Hartley's stewardship that these articles were published. And it was not only the Cato Manor article, there's also the rendition articles relating to Ahmad Ramat and Shadrach Sabia, and then also the SARS story, the SARS rogue story with Johan van Lachenberg, Ivan Pillay, and the like. So I was approached by the new editor at the time, Mr. Sikoko, and he said to me that they've done their homework and they've investigated and they've realized that they'd been played. And I was grateful for him making that admission to me. And on the day there, I told him, look, well, he indicated that they were going to apologize and that they would give me the opportunity to write my own op-ed, and they would publish it unedited, and that they would also write their own apology, and I'm free to add to the apology. and which I did not do. I wasn't not going to dictate to them what to write, but they wrote my op-ed verbatim. It was in the Sunday Times, page number 5 is quite a prominent page. So the entire page was dedicated to my version of events at the time. And I said to Mr. Setok at the time, I don't intend suing the newspaper. And when after they apologized, and as we speak, my civil matter against the state is going to court next month, the Durban High Court. But at the time, my lawyers indicated to me that I have a good case against the Sunday Times, and I said to them that my word is my word, I'm not going to do that. And although I suspect some of the rest of the guys took action against the Sunday Times, but I didn't.
Final challenge. If one thing must change tomorrow to stop collapse, what would it be?
Now, every institution's has got a leader, and the country's got a leader. I think our state president must really take up the cudgels, forget about internal politics, and show true leadership. Because only true leadership is going to get us out of this mess. He really has to be committed in not satisfying people within his party. He's got a responsibility to every citizen in the country, across the color divide. And I think if there's one person that can change it and that should give that direction, it's the leader of a country. And he should do that. The responsibility is on him.
Great. Well, thank you, General Johan Booysen. It's been a great honor. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for watching this. This has been Donald Brown for Truth Report. Please like and subscribe. See you next time.